done being Vaduz. So good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this third day already of SummerSOC, and our first speaker is Wolfgang Reisig from the Humboldt University of Berlin, and he will talk about conceptual foundations of service orientation and beyond.
That's important.
Yes, absolutely.
Did I include yesterday only? And I was included yesterday two remarks with which I would like to start because they give me a good motivation of what comes later on.
Microphone.
Huh?
Switch on your microphone.
Okay, now you listen.
Perfect.
That's better. Okay, I start with two remarks that motivate my whole talk. The first remark is, the first remark is a remark on the Einstein Center of Digital Future. That is the center which our honorable friend Christoph mentioned yesterday already. So as I said, it is a program, it is a project that develops embedded systems, and it applies all the current buzzwords. Let me change this a little bit so that I can see better. Okay, so the current buzzwords: health, mobility, industry 4.0, and services. So whatever buzzwords that exist, they put in this project, and then they make, say, the best practices that exist already, and they apply it, and then they're very proud of these results. What they do not do is anything new, anything fundamentally new. And so the name Einstein is completely misleading, because what Einstein did was really a revolution, was really completely new. Whereas what they do is just apply existing technologies.
I think you have the wrong view, Wolfgang. I have to adjust that.
Christoph, he can be honest.
He can be honest, but false.
And love the friend.
I can even prove this, or you can prove it yourself. So there's an executive board, and one member of the board is our honorable friend.
This explains everything.
And so what they had to do is to complete the sentence: when I look into the digital future, then blah, blah, blah. And it's 10 people, and you can expect what they say. Digital future is bright and beautiful and very good.
No.
And some say, well, maybe we have to care a little bit about privacy. But
No?
But nothing. But again, they don't say nothing really new, except one. And the only reason why I start this way is the one. By the way, he is not a computer scientist. He comes from the University of Fine Arts. Okay, so and he completes this sentence as follows. He says, "When I look into the digital future, I see great need of harmonizing unlimited potential of a planet-sized universal Turing machine." Okay, so I was impressed by this, and I thought, okay,
What exactly is revolutionary on the Turing machine? Planet size.
let's see. This is a very good question.
I want an answer.
And you are actually contradicting yourself, Wolfgang, because you always said the Turing machine is not able to explain what you are doing.
Right, and that is what I will explain in a minute.
This is a beyond.
So, okay, I thought here is the planet,
Yeah.
and now there is a really big Turing tape on spanning all the planet, and you can make a lot of jokes about this quote here. But I think what he really had in mind, and don't forget he is at the University of Fine Arts, what he really wanted to say is he sees a great need of a unifying theory for really big planet-sized digital infrastructures. I think that's what he had in mind. And as he doesn't know so much about informatics, he says the fundamental ideas are usually covered in informatics and Turing machines, and therefore he says a universal Turing machine. But what he has in mind, and I think he has in mind, was a theory that is as solid and as deep as Turing machines are. But what we really need is, of course, not this Turing machine stuff, just symbol crunching automata, but a real big theory for that time. So I think, at least I think that is what he had in mind, and as I said, it is the only really original idea in the whole project. Okay, Christoph doesn't agree, but that's because I told you.
anymore.
Okay, this was my first remark, and my second remark is on yesterday's talk of Shara, where he says, digital ecosystems, nobody is looking at the whole zoo. That's what you said here yesterday. And I think that is not true, because at least two of us, him and me. Okay, so I just, when you gave your talk yesterday, I just compiled some wording.
This is buzzword complete at the Digital Center.
Yes, the buzzwords of Shah, why not? Yeah. And I think a unifying theory for all of this will require a lot of notions. I still have a problem to stand on the right place. I should not go there. I was told.
Oh, yeah.
No, I should go, maybe I go here. Oh yeah, that is good. So what we need is, say, canonical universal principles independent of semantical details, and as Sharam says, inspired by nature. Maybe this is a good idea, I'm not so sure, but it's an interesting idea. And at least what Sharam made was, he put a lot of interesting questions, whereas the Einstein program is just to put a lot of solutions, and questions are much more interesting than solutions are.
Disagree.
Me too.
Yeah. Okay.
I think you are overemphasizing what you are doing. Shooting hard, getting it back hard.
Wolfgang, the real truth is, once you leave, you detect who your friends are.
Okay, so it is now my talk, and my topic is that we should have a long-term objective of a project program, what we want to do, a unifying theory for, I call it sort of a digital infrastructure, Sharon calls it digital ecosystem. I think this is what we have in mind is the same. And I just give four aspects how this, what could contribute possibly to such a theory. And the four aspects are the following. First, I speak about models, then about invariance, that is the favorite topic of Frank. And then I speak about distributedness, I think that is your favorite topic, and about components and composition, and that is my favorite topic, as some of you may remember from last year. Why did I choose those four topics? Not because I'm sure they are the most relevant ones for this kind of theory. I don't know what will be at the end the most relevant topics. I have chosen them only because I can say something about these four topics, how they could contribute to such a theory. Okay? So let's start with the first point, that is models. If you look to science in general, then you see models in science are the general concept. So what science does is they produce models. And the models may be quite difficult. So if you look at models in physics, I think most of us don't really understand these models because they are so deep mathematics that it is really difficult to understand, but there are models that are used. So the distance between what is modeled and the models themselves may be quite large in real sciences. Of course, we'll compare this with what was the case in informatics, and there it's a bit more shallow. So on Monday we have seen quantum computing model may be implemented in different ways. So one and the same model, that's how I understood it, may be implemented in different ways in this quantum world, which I don't understand at all. Okay, so what about models in informatics? So in the 1960s, and I'm sure most of you don't remember this very well, at the end of 1960s, there was called something software crisis, because it was visible that produced software is not so simple as it was assumed to be. And then there were solutions proposed. And the solution proposed were better programming languages. And I think this was already a mistake. They should have suggested instead better models. They should have started with modeling the problem world and not the implementation world. But what they did is better programming languages. This one nobody remembers, this one from IBM, and smaller ones, Pascal, etc. I could list a lot of programming languages there. But it was always focused on programming languages and not on the problems to be solved, which would mean modeling languages. Later on, there were these languages, and programs and models was more or less, programs are models, but very bad models for the human reader. I think programs are made for the computers and not for the human readers. So to read that you read programs is a little bit crazy. You should read models, and from the models, the program should be automatically generated. So I think the mistake was it was focused on implementation, not on the problems or not on the algorithmic ideas. And this must and will change in the new area of what will develop now. Okay, so this programs as models example, I will show you drastically by a concrete example that was introduced by Edgar Dijks at that time, and it is a pebble game. So it's not my example, it's his example. And what is given is an urn like this one here, and if you could look inside, well, usually not look inside, if you could look inside, you will find finitely many black and white pebbles. Don't know how many there are, but there are black and white pebbles. And you have you can do some actions, and it's very simple. You repeat as long as possible the following. Firstly, you remove two pebbles, and you call them A and B, and you return a pebble C. And now the second rule is, if the color of A and B differ, so if you take out two differently colored pebbles, then what you return is white, and otherwise what you return is black. Okay? So I think every 5-year child could easily play this game. And this is an argument which I return to later. Okay. So the question is, how could we model this behavior? I want to have a formal model for this because I want to prove a lot of things. For instance, I want to prove that it terminates. I want to prove that independent on the order in which you take out the pebbles, the result is always the same. And there are a lot of other properties. For instance, the color of the last pebble that remains depends only on the number of white pebbles and not on the number of black pebbles. So these kind of properties you want to prove, and therefore you need a formal model. Okay? So Dijkstra gave a formal model, maybe this one, and I will show you now this smart. Now you will see Dijkstra. Who has seen Dijkstra in person? Some have, yeah, some have, but the others will see him now first, and maybe last time. And I hope now I can start this process. It's unbelievable. Now I cannot start it. No. We tried it out, and there it worked. There is.
Required at least two pebbles in the urn. You took them out and looked at the colors. And they could have different colors. There could be a white one and a black one. When is that a possible outcome? Well, when initially there was at least a white and at least a black one in the urn. So the condition under which we could pick up a mixed set, a white one and a black one, is that W is at least one and B is at least one. Well, that's the part of the first alternative. See, little W at least one and little B at least one error. There I have sketched as a reminder between braces the rule of the game, and it says that when you take out a white one and a black one, a white one is returned. And then the assignment statement B becomes B minus 1. We see the net effect of that move. The number of black pebbles is decreased by 1. The number of white pebbles is unchanged. black pebbles can be taken out and a black will be returned, again the net effect on filling of the urn is maybe going to be -1. The complicated case, when 2 white pebbles are taken out, well, that's the case where we might need the black paint, because W decreases by 2 and B increases by B +1.
Which is wrong, increases by 1. Okay, so that was Dijkstra, and that was the way he modeled this, because it's a non-deterministic program, and this he calls guarded commands. These are words that are no longer useful. I think this has something to do with the pebble game, that is true, but he doesn't model the pebble game. He doesn't model pebbles. He assumes, for instance, that the number of pebbles, the black pebbles and the white pebbles, numbers are known initially, because otherwise you cannot make these computations. Whereas in the way I introduced it, you just know there are some pebbles inside. The number is not known. So initial number must be known, and there are integer variables. The run of this program must know these numbers. There are variables, and there is computing on the integers. In the game, nobody is computing on integers. In the game, you have pebbles, and you take them out and put them in. That's the activities to do, and not making integer computing, etc. In his model, there are no urns, no pebbles, no actions on removing and returning something. So this program has something to do with the pebble game. Say religion has something to do with the church, but it is not the same. Okay? Or justice has something to do with the lawyer, but it's really not the same. In this sense, this program has something to do with the pebble game. And the question, and of course, the 5-year-old children cannot cope with this program. They could maybe cope with the pebble game, but not with this program. So you see, his kind of modeling is completely inadequate. But until his very end, he insisted the only reasonable way of modeling in informatics is with programs. So programs and models is not a difference. And don't use any other kind of models. And I think he was not the only one who had this attitude, but others had it too. So this is my favorite example of how Dijkstra was contributing to informatics. We all know, by the way, that he also contributed some very interesting and reasonable things, but he also contributed a lot of nonsense, and this is one of them.
You see, I hope you don't fall into the same thing.
I'm sure that Christoph is my friend anymore. Okay, it's a lousy model, so let's ask what is a better one, and now we look for a better one. So we have an urn. And I say this is a representation of the urn. Dijkstra had no urn. I have an urn. And say, so in my concrete example, you may have 2 white and 3 black pebbles, and I represent the pebbles. Of course, you can say the game is not about 2 white and 3 black. The game is about any number of pebbles. So you must start in a different way with a symbol representing a finite amount of pebbles. So now this text here, this is one symbol, pebbles, and the whole thing should be a schema for infinitely many initial states. And this is done as you do it in logic with a constant symbol. You have a constant symbol, and that is called pebbles, and it's a symbol to be interpreted by a set of black and white pebbles. And every instantiation, every interpretation gives you then a starting point to make the game.
But isn't that the difference to Dijkstra is that you also have a variable that is untyped?
No, it's not a variable, it's a constant symbol. In logical terms, in logic you have variables and constant symbols. So this is a constant symbol.
So if Dijkstra would have had non-typed variables, would that have been better?
Don't know, so ask him. Okay. So now you have the activity. So you put something out, and in the moment it's just graphic. You put the mixed set of the white and the black pebble, and you return the white one, and then you make a box indicating that it's mixed, just to make sure, to indicate this is the action you can execute. And if you take out two black ones, then you return a black one, and this is the black action, and likewise you have a white action. Take out. So this is a graphical representation of the urn, of a schema for the unspecified number of pebbles and three activities that can occur. Okay. So now you can say, is this just a graphical representation or is it a formal representation? And of course, that is looking already to this is mathematics. What you see is pure mathematics. And if you have such an instantiation, the one we have already, you can ask, what is the formal aspect of this? So what is the set of behaviors in this? What kind of behavior is represented now? Well, one behavior is a sequence of activities. And you can have, for instance, this sequence of activities, and believe me, if first we make the mixed activity, then the black one, then the mixed again, then the white one, then it terminates. But this is not the only way to terminate. We have a lot of sequences of activities. And then you say, aha, yes, that's what we usually do in informatics. A behavior of a system is a sequence of activities. Is this a good idea? Well, it is the usual idea, but it's not a good idea. Because what is really behind, if the systems are really big, so there is not a sequence of activities. So if you say the internet operates in a sequence of activities, everybody will say this is a little bit crazy. So what else is it if it's not a sequence of activities? Well, it's a partial order of activities. And I show you the following. So this is the initial state, 2 white and 3 black pebbles, and maybe the first activity is this one, and independent of this is a black activity, that one, and then the outcome of the first 2 results in this activity, and then the remaining white pebble, and so together they come to this. So it's partial order, or you can say, well, it's a sequence of steps. There are 2 activities together, and then a single one, and then a single one again.
This is an arbitrary partial order, because it also started by comparing.
Right. And now I'll show you another example where the idea to say it's a sequence of steps, and in one step there occur many things is also not good. Okay, and that's the following. You start with a white activity and a black one, and then there's another black one here, and then the results of the white one and this black one returns the black one. The fundamental difference is that now, graphically, I agree that they seem to be together, but there is a partial order. They could also be together. And even the term to be together is nonsense here. So here is a sequence of 2 steps, and here is one, and they are completely detached and independent. And if you consider behavior in this way, then you can compose behavior in a much more elegant way. And the third example is the following. You may have even 2 occurrences of the mixed behavior concurrently to each other. Okay? So this kind of partial order is the right model of behavior of big systems. Okay. Of course, we had a lot of modeling languages. It was not. I thought it was Christoph annoying me.
You know, I'm very direct, not behind the scene, okay?
Yeah. Okay, so we had a lot of executable modeling languages and pure modeling languages, but modeling languages were never what they should be, namely what is in UML called first-class citizens. And let me quote Grady Booch, who is one of the inventors of UML. We must elevate models as to a first-class citizenship, a peer of traditional text languages, and potentially its master. This is the role of models. Forget programming, do modeling. That is what is behind this. The fundamental difference is between modeling and programming is model behavior is not necessarily implemented. Okay, and of course, if you have business informatics where you have some formally defined operations but to be executed by institutions or by persons, you don't intend to implement it. Still, you must describe them and you must argue with them, and that you can only do in models and not in programs. And the most important thing, the modeler freely chooses the level of abstraction, whereas in programming languages you are forced to apply the level of abstraction given in the language. Okay, that was my point. You are leaving.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Actually, I'm not leaving the lecture, I'm leaving the island. So but I wanted to see a few minutes. Thank you.
See you next year. Bye-bye. Okay. So the next part is invariant, and I go again here.
May I make a little comment to the last slide? What you say is freely chooses is not quite correct. You always choose depending on the context and who is reading that, right?
Yeah, but you can choose.
Yeah, sure. But in programming language, the interpreter is the machine. So you need to have a language that can be understood by the machine. And in modeling, you use the language according to the stakeholder. If you go to a CEO, you have a completely different model that you represent.
I couldn't say that.
Thank you. Oh, you're going to be exchanging friends.
Okay. So invariance. Why is invariance so important? Let's start very fundamentally. What is a good scientific theory? A good scientific theory provides good descriptions or models of Europe of interest. And now the next question is, what is a good model? Good model allows to predict behavior, future behavior, and it allows to derive a lot of interesting properties. Okay? And the central aspect of this kind of model of science is invariance. So what is an invariant? It's this, you have usually processes where a lot of things change, and invariant is something that does not change while the rest of the world changes. It's an invariant. And let's look at deep invariance in science. And I think physics is always a good example for what we are doing. So a physical process preserves the involved amount of energy, for instance. Whatever happens if you crash your car on a wall, then a lot of things change. Your car is broken. But something was invariant, and that was the amount of energy. It was first in the gasoline, and it was in the acceleration, and then it's in the changed metal and in heat and whatever. And I think this notion of energy is quite a complicated notion. You can compare what is in a battery with something that is in gasoline. Okay, this is in some sense very, very difficult and deep, but in an intuitive sense it is very obvious. Everybody has a good feeling about what energy is. But if you start thinking about this notion, then you see how difficult it is. And I think how it evolved was the other way around. So it was a question, what remains constant in all these processes? And this is a very abstract thing, and then we give it a name, we call it energy, and then the notion of energy, the scientific notion, was developed from invariance. So good notions of science are developed from invariance. And there's a lot, well, this is another famous invariant that, as Einstein said, real Einstein, not this Einstein Center. So,
We'll see.
Real Einstein said there's even an invariance between energy and mass. And this is this famous equation. Okay. Here's another example which I think I should not go to. Chemical, I think chemistry as a science started when they started with this kind of invariance that we learn at school. Theoretical biology, which is emerging now, they also start with invariance and saying metabolism is something that retains the amount of matter. So they define metabolism as an invariant. Okay, this invariant governs the design of scientific notions. I think this is in real science the case.
Politics? No. In politics, the invariant is nothing.
There's another invariant in politics, and it's our chancellor. But I'm not so sure it could be a joke. Okay, so what about invariance in informatics? I think the elder people here remember that we were taught, I think it's not taught anymore, classical programs, there are the only half invariant calculus for programs. Okay, you remember who knows this theory? Some, 1/3. 1/3. Nowadays it is not taught anymore in many places, at least not in Berlin, because these people who teach programming, they even don't teach this kind of fundamentals. Okay, there's another, in patinates you have beautiful invariants that, by the way, are much more expressive than Hawk-Omni-Hor invariants, and the reason is, in patinates, the transitions are reversible, so you don't lose information when you proceed, and that helps you with good invariants. But say, compared to real sciences, these invariants are, temporologically you have some invariants, but these invariants are not really impressive. It's very shallow, very close to the subject about which you speak. So we need something completely new thinking of what an invariant is, and I think I would like to see the following. Ask the question, what remains invariant when using a cash machine? This is also an embedded system. I think that is clear. The amount of money on your account plus the amount of money in your hand remains invariant. First, it is much on the account and nothing in your hand, and at the end there is less on your account and more on your hand. But the sum should be the same. So this is a little bit more impressive invariant. But I would like to see an invariant, or notion of invariance, that so what remains constant when a garbage collector is running. So the system is changing, something happens in the computer, but as long as nothing goes in and out, something remains invariant. You may call it information or call it whatever you want. We don't have a notion for this, but I think this kind of thing we should look for. But the notion is it's adequate for garbage collector that remains, or communication protocol or whatever you have. So something remains while things change, and these things that remain are invariants in a much more general sense than what we have usually done in informatics. Okay. We need basic notions based on invariance. A notion, well, call it information, or if you don't like this word, take another one. As it should have the following properties: as long as the computer does not interact with others, the amount of information, whatever you call it, remains constant in the computer. Okay? This kind of notion we need. During computation, information is reordered, but neither generated nor destroyed. So you say intuitively the notions you know so far are not like this, but it should be done. And if we have such a kind of also an interesting property could be information is what we use to decide an alternative. And afterward, after we have decided the alternative, the information is gone because it has been used up. I think if we have it sometimes in this kind of a notion, then also the notion of privacy may become more sensible than what we see so far.
I totally disagree. You don't understand what privacy has been developed already. I'll show you later on.
I'm not impressed about what I
even by
so
colleagues who are the theory.
Maybe today I will become more impressed. Okay, and that was my second point. Third point is distributedness. Yeah, in the digital infrastructure or in the digital ecosystem, there is nothing global. Do you agree?
No.
No.
I think what is global is exactly the energy or information which you're talking
An invariant, okay. Oh, yeah, I agree. There are global invariants. Yeah, there are global. This so I should formulate it a little bit more precise. Global invariants, of course, there are. That is the notion of invariance. So, okay, I take it back. What I wanted to say, to forget this, what I had in mind was really about this one. Every action or event or activity or something that happens has always a local cause and a local effect. This was my central point, and I see that Charles agrees now. So cause and effect are always local in a big system and not global. And that means, consequently, autonomy is not just necessary but inevitable, because if something has a local cause and effect, it operates only on this local area and has no global view on anything.
But again, in the new context of quantum computing, if you have entanglement, nobody affects.
Yeah, entanglement.
But even without quantum, you have the quantum complexity science is well known. You know, so the butterfly effect.
And you say general patterns that are
They have
agreed
a
on.
global effect as well, even if they just start locally and you see local.
Aha.
When you see multiple.
Yeah, I fully agree. So, but what you say is something different. You say it starts locally and then it causes a lot of effects. And after a while, then we have a global effect of this. That is true.
Yeah, but that is true, but you didn't write it here. You just said it has local effect.
But a single small elementary action starts locally. The fire starts always locally. And after a while, everything is burned.
Well, that doesn't help. Because ultimately everything is global always.
Ultimately, everything is affected. I agree.
So basically, I think the cosmology of what you think as a digital infrastructure should be, you are assuming it's a machine, whereas I am opting for having the organism as the metaphor. And I think this is the fundamental different questions that you would rather ask.
Yeah, but John, you have organism. You have a temporal aspect, right?
Right?
Okay, and this is missing, the temporal aspect.
Yeah, maybe that still comes.
I don't like temporal aspect. What I would prefer to say is
Yeah, but you want to model reality.
it is causality. It starts in a small place and it
Yeah, but it starts, has a temporal aspect. You start
And can change.
Yeah,
So
There's an
basically,
order.
the means
Don't
that-
call it time.
there's an order. Yes, I agree with the order, and I agree with, as he says, there's an order, a partial order usually.
Yeah, sure.
And with this I agree completely. I wouldn't like to call it time.
Okay, then
Because-
partial order.
For other reasons.
And I also disagree with you the separation of local and global, because again, it might be very subjective. For one problem, things are local, for another problem, it's global, depending.
At the system level,
Yeah.
nothing is local. I guess this is the point. When you have the overview of the system, even something that happens in a small part
So you say that the whole
takes
globe
some
is,
effect over there, but it changes the overall situation.
Over time.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is also true in organisms. So
Yeah,
you are not the
exactly.
same as
Exactly.
yesterday.
Yeah.
It's real. You are.
that is, I agree with everything you say. Maybe it's a problem of formulation and not of perception. Okay. So now, what about the planet-sized universal Turing machine that we started with? You remember my very first remark was about this guy saying he wants a universal Turing machine that is, in a way, planet-sized, or it concerns everything. So, and I think it would be interesting to have a distributed version of this. And how would this look like? It would be a universal Turing machine. I hope some of you remember from university what a universal Turing machine is. It is, in a way, an interpreter of any other Turing machine, and it's running on a. So what I would like to see, a distributed interpreter running on a distributed architecture, interpreting a distributed description of distributed systems, and then it's run on a distributed architecture. So one can ask, this is a beautiful concept, does it exist? Does such a thing exist? And we can prove that the first answer is it does not exist. And the second answer is it does exist. But you have to pay a smaller, not so small price, namely the algorithm that does it, or this machine that does it, is a probabilistic machine. And that is interesting because probabilism now, as I learned from the talks on physics, in physics you always have probabilistic arguments, and probabilistic algorithms are not as bad as long as you choose the probabilistic amount. If you say 99.9990 is enough, then
In the small physics, in cosmology, there is no problem.
okay, yeah. So, yeah, Stefan,
That shows local versus global.
That's it.
yeah, now
Yeah,
you see,
yeah,
now
that's a good
come
point.
interesting questions. Now come the interesting questions that we address here. And when you look at the Paxos protocol, who knows the Paxos protocol? Who did understand it? No, I didn't
Who
understand.
has been to Paxos already? Yeah, that's also a nice question.
I think we all have problems to understand Paxos, and after a while, I understood why I didn't understand it, because there is a very hidden place where probabilism plays a role. And you must find this place. And otherwise, you have no chance to understand this. So there's a lot of cheating in this. And we should make it open and say clearly, probabilism is not so bad as long as it's acceptable. Okay. Yeah. So it may be the case that in the future, probabilistic distributed algorithms are the standard version of how to describe our brave new world in the future. It's not the classical input-output programs that we have in the Turing machine world, but it's this kind of algorithms as a starting point for a nice theory. I'm not sure at all. This was an idea yesterday. That's why I never came to the lunches, because I had to insert all this stuff. Okay, my fourth and last point is components and composition. I think it is clear digital ecosystem structure. Structure is frequently hierarchical, and what we would like to see is canonical universal principles independent of semantical details for hierarchical systems. And they exist more or less as a specification. You say the specification is abstract, and in the hierarchy the implementation is refined, and there is a logical implication between this specification implies implementation. So we have refinement calculus, encapsulation principles. So we have a starting point of a theory of hierarchy. But is this the only principle that we need? And the answer is no. There is another principle that is maybe even much more important, and that is the structure is composed in this way. So it's a horizontal composition of components. Not a hierarchy, but horizontal composition of components. And in this context, we also want to have canonical universal principles. And
why does the dot impress
kind of composition
horizontally and not vertically? This is geometrical perception, horizontal, vertical. If you have an abstract notation, why do you have a semantic that this is horizontal instead of
no, you don't put it. I just want to say you want to compose many components.
Yeah. But you said it's not vertical, it's horizontal.
No, it's not hierarchical.
Okay.
It's not about.
Okay. All right.
Now it's not about hierarchy.
Right.
Now it's about composition.
You're right. Yes.
Okay, and then we also want this kind of principles. And do we have this kind of principles? And the answer is so far not. So people have thought a lot about hierarchy, but not so much about composition. And well, this is a supply chain which is composed in some way, and what we would say the raw material, service, or whatever is composed with the supplier and manufacturer, etc. So this kind of composition is what we would like to see, and we have some techniques to cope with this. For instance, event-based systems like PubSub or service orientation, or the stock area where we have provided successive forecasts. So we have a little bit of general principles for this one, but not so many. So the question is, what are the fundamentals of this kind of a composition? And one aspect is important. There are some components. So a component usually consists of an interface and an inner structure. And I think this is a general principle that might be applied in this kind of a theory that we will find, what we want to find. But the point is the interface should be a strict and formal notion, because then you can describe what composition means in a strict way. Whereas the inner structure, you can be liberal and do the inner structure in the way you want to do it. Choose your language, choose your whatever you want.
Why is the inner structure relevant in your theory? Why is the inner structure relevant in your theory? Because composition may be recursive.
Okay, you want to define composition without reference to the inner structure.
This is my question. Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do it. You must be able to do this.
Okay. Yeah, this will work. Okay.
A composition should be a formal concept dependent only on the interface and not on the inner structure. Okay. One fundamental aspect you want to have in this world is composition is associative. For instance, here I did not make any brackets, and here I did not make any brackets, and nobody complained. For good reasons you didn't complain, because intuitively you always assume that this, if you first compose A with B, and then from the right you compose C, it should be the same as composing first B and C, and then from the left the A. So if this is not given, then you have a tree of something, then everything becomes really too complicated. So associativity is a fundamental principle in this world. Okay, no brackets allowed. And we assume this usually without saying. Okay, so now my question is how much time I have left? Because I made it
15 minutes.
It's still some time. Okay. So now let's start to make a theory on this basis. How would it look like? Here's an obvious start. The interface is somehow structured, and the most general idea is it's a set of something. I call it gates, because last year I called it differently, and Shah complained that this, forgotten which notion I took. Yes, it's okay. Now I take gates, and everybody has a gate, and each gate has a label, and for instance, this is the component A. It has two gates, and the labels are R and S, and B is also two gates, the labels are R and T, and the component C has one gate, and the labels are. Okay, I think everybody agrees this is a very general kind of component, and composition then means, for instance, if you compose A and B, you glue equally labeled gates. So everybody would agree we should do it this way. And here I've composed A with B, so the R labels are occurring in both components, and therefore they are glued together and go inside, and what remains is this gate S and this gate T. That's the composition of A and B. And now if you compose C from the right, so you have an R label, but there is no R label left here, so this would be the composition of AB with C. Okay, so let's do the other way around first, B and C, and there we see there is two labels with the same, two gates with the same label, and they are glued together and go inside, and the T, this T remains, and now if you compose A from the right, you get this one. And now we don't like the word anymore, because we see these two systems are different. So associativity is not given. So on the one hand, we have started with the most general thing we have in mind.
It depends how you define the equivalence relation. So for example, I could say the remaining lollipops are R, S, and T. They are the same, although they didn't tell us how, when a composition is equal to another.
The composition.
No, you say here both are, the two resulting structures are different.
Yeah.
Why are they different? So from my I could define that the remaining lollipops are R, S, and T.
If you abstract it one level and you have left R, S, and T, and it looks the same. And the inner part is liberal.
I understand that you have a quotient, so to speak,
Yes.
but then you have to make this quotient. And you would forget if this R labeled gate belongs to the old A, or if the R labeled gate belongs to the old C. But that may be important, because that's one is the answer to heaven, but the other is the answer to hell. And both are labeled R, and you're interested to take the right answer. So, but what you did is what everybody, I think many people started this way, and then they saw it's not associated, and then they started this kind of tricks, so to speak. And then you find a lot of literature how to solve this problem. Some, I think how to solve this problem. Some ignore it, they define only what it means to compose two and don't care about the rest. Some restrict the choice of labels and say you are not allowed to have the same labels thrown so many times. Or they define what it means n-fold composition, and of your idea you have a quotient. So then a lot of tricks, so to speak, start, and nothing comes out that would be sufficiently general and beautiful. Okay? And I will show you now a solution to this problem that is general and beautiful. Okay. My proposal is the following. We look again to our examples. So these are so many examples that have this structure, and we see the interface is very often, almost always, in a very natural way, partitioned. For instance, input and output, or customer supplier, requester provider, consumer producer, buy side, sell side, predecessor, successor, assumption, guarantees, push. You find so many examples where in a very natural way the interface is partitioned into two. You may find interface partitioned into 3 or 17, but then you can frequently reduce them to 2. And as you will see, one interface is not good, that we have seen, it's not associative. 3 or more is not necessary, that you will see, but 2 is excellent. Okay.
But in your field before, you also have made suggested this separation into 2.
Yeah.
By drawing A and B.
Yes, yes, of course. Then, yeah, and I will do this. You see, I have made it, one side always blue and the other red, and the trick is blue stands, the L stands for left, blue is for left, and red is for right. Okay, that is my kind of doing. And so the only idea is now to say a component has the left and the right interface. So the notion of interface we have seen remains, but then a component has 2 interfaces, the left one and the right one. And now the question, of course, is how do you glue them? Well, you glue the right interface of the left component with the left interface of the right component. That's what you will do. And I will show you an example here. Here you have a component A with the left interface and the right interface, component B with its left interface and its right interface. And if you compose them, then you see, well, these 2 gates are equally labeled, so they go inside, and these 2 remain outside. You see that here. And now the problem is that, of course, you want to have the same kind of thing again. So this definitely would go to the left side of the composed system, and they go to the right side of the composed system. But where do they go? That's the only open point you can do, and it is very obvious what you would do. You do it this way. Okay? So I think this is an absolutely natural notion of composition. And of course, now the big question is this associative? Okay? If it is not, you cannot use it, but it is associative. The proof was not so easy. It was a combinatorial proof. It was published in Acta Informatica last year, and it took me quite a while to arrange this. This kind of composition is associative, and that's what you need in general cases. I show you some cases for this, and I do it quite quickly now. Here we have a producer with the right interface and no left interface, the client with the left and no right interface, and in the middle you have a broker, and well, you can compose for them, and this one, or the other way around. It's associative, makes no order, is not important. And even down here, now you have 2 elements that are labeled alike, and they are also glued together. So this would be a simple example of how this works. But I show you now very quickly some more examples. Once you have a workflow with the machine involved, the material is changed to products. So you can have 2 instances of this, and then you do them this way, and that is what would come out. You can also compose 3 of them, and this comes out. And if you compose 17 of them, you know what comes out. And you can add a workflow model that takes 2 products and makes a parcel out of it. And then it goes like this, and you just provide 3 times the workflow model and then the model M. So this simple composition comes like this. And now I just show you very quickly some examples where you see how flexible it is. Now, first in mathematical terms, that is important. What do we have? We start with a finite set of symbols, the labels of the gates. 5 minutes. Are you sure?
4.
4.5.
Christoph is so generous. So we have gate labels, we have an interface, which is just the notion of an interface, which is a finite ordered set labeled over the gate labels. We know what a component is. It has 2 interfaces. We know what Then we know what the class of all components is. So that's all standard things now. We know what composition means. And then we have a fundamental theory that composition on components is total and associative. Total means you can compose in principle any two components. Maybe semantically it's not so sensible, but you can always do this. So we have a trivial component with empty interfaces. So if you compose the empty interface, nothing changes. And I think most computer scientists of you know already, aha, that is a monoid. And we know this algebraic structure of a monoid. Those who don't know what a monoid is should remember what formal languages are. Formal languages are a monoid. And now we have something that is like formal languages, but instead of saying a word over an alphabet, we have a component over an alphabet. And the wonderful thing is now we can apply all the machinery of formal languages to components and their composition. Okay? I would have expected that you stand up and clap and say, this is wonderful.
You said that last year.
You still
I said it last year. Okay. So Sharam would ask, how can you do everything with this? So this is such a simple thing. How can you do, in some sense, everything with this? And there are some things you would like to express. So there are many composition operators that include a lot of other stories like composability, interoperability, etc. How can you do this? And the idea is, of course, you want to express things like this, but don't express it in the composition operator. Instead, express it in what I call an adapter. Put an adapter between the components, and then express everything you want to say into the adapter. I give you an example. You have an A and a B, and of course, in the sense what I said before, this goes with, they are glued together and they are glued together. Now it may be you want to make it differently. You want to glue this with this and this with that. What would you do? You put an adapter in between and that's it. Or you want non-determinism, then you make it like this. So put every wish you want that is usually put into the composition operator, separate it and put it into an adapter. And then you can do everything. And I skip this because it only says you can compose adapters in a very simple way.
Can you
it's difficult.
the adapter on the Petronet?
It was an example.
Okay, only
Just an example. You can
because the inner structure is irrelevant.
An adapter is any component. You may choose as an adapter whatever you wish. A component it should be. Okay. So here I have an example, or a simple example. Abstract migration is a sequence of 4 components. I skip. Here is a small computer architecture where you see semantically you can say there's messages running from left to right, but then back again. So it is not such, if you make a composition from left to right, that the information goes from left to right. That is not the case. It may go from left to right, it may go something from right to left. So there is no order of flow in this. It's only composing elements. Preservation of properties, you have an example. This is a car rental business process. After an accident, you rent a car. So this is a model, and there is a notion of soundness, which I don't speak about, looking at your face. And you ask, is this sound? And the answer can be very simple. You compose this from these 6 elements, and each of them is trivially sound, and the theory by composition, this is also sound. Okay. So now what we did, we have a BPMN example, and we decomposed it into components. We have here the interfaces, and just by composing them, you retain your own system. I have this tungsten architectural modeling. I think you all have seen this kind of pictures. You can do the same. You decompose them and give trivial labels, more or less trivial labels, and then you compose the 5 components and you get it back. Okay. Then a topic that I do not address at all, looking at your face, is the theme. But I say what the problem is. The problem is if you have a composed system, sometimes you want to go back what were the components. And in general, you cannot go back. So the question is, what do you have to retain to be able to go back? And I learned from my colleague Hans Schmidt in Melbourne that this is very relevant. This is very relevant for interface description languages and for early architecture description languages, things I don't know much about. But he said this is relevant to be able to decompose. So the question is, what have to do to retain, to decompose? And here I show you what you're missing. So this shows what you should retain, such that you can decompose and slowly, if you have a composed system, you decompose it this way, okay? Now it is decomposed. And these are the advantages of what I have told you. What did we achieve conceptually? Canonical universal principles for the composition of systems, generally enough to satisfy Sharam, hopefully. And the idea to be strict on interface but liberal on the inner structure is just, I think, what you autonomy. This is by construction autonomous. Okay. Supporting horizontal scaling, that's what the horizontal scaling was, what Gregor Hope discussed yesterday a little bit. Yeah, you were sleeping, maybe you were sleeping. But I remember, I don't remember, I've written.
He talked about the horizontal scaling, yes,
yeah.
but I don't see how it is reflected in what you're saying.
Okay, let's see it. So the resume of this talk is, we need a theory for digital infrastructure, and it should be as deep and as strong as computability theory. That refers again to the world-spanning Turing machine, but of course for a much broader area. Potential ingredients are the 4 topics I talked about, and I think, so let's do it. Okay, that's all. Thank you. By surprise, Sharon has a question.
In the interest of the coffee break, I have just one question, but you should think carefully before answering. Would you agree to the statement that the way we perceive the world determines our models?
It may be true, yes.
And can you explain the obsession about this unifying theory? Is that just stolen from physics? And is that basically just, if you look at the history of science and Newtonian physics, Einstein, quantum, they are trying to figure out the way the world is, but most of the things that we are doing is how the world should be. Do you think that we should really aim for a unifying theory? Is that the right question, really? And is the claim that we can never come up with a unifying theory good? Because we are actually seeing the world in just one way then.
I agree with half of the sentences.
The rest is the coffee break.
That's the coffee break.
Well, one final question before the coffee break. Would it be fine?
A short one, yeah.
A short one. When I see the figures and I see that the components are composed nicely, don't you need? Do they compose nicely because you arrange them in the right order? The right question is, don't you need commutativity?
No.
So you are not cheating by arranging the components?
I'm cheating sometimes, you are right, but this time not.
Trust me now. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you again. And